Captain Lee Hana slowly moved her ship through the busy space lanes around Nexus Station. The massive trading post was alive with movement as hundreds of alien vessels came and went like bees around a hive. Ships of every shape and size filled the docking bays, sleek Altarian cruisers with their mirror-bright hulls, bulky Vorthak cargo haulers that looked like flying mountains, and elegant Zenthran warships that seemed to dance through space. But the silent storm looked nothing. Like these impressive vessels, her hull was a mess of different-colored metal patches, some newer than others, giving her the appearance of a ship that had been rebuilt too many times to count. Weapon mounts looked outdated and jury-rigged. Even her engine ports seemed to sputter and spark more than they should. To any casual observer, she was exactly what humans were known for, making do with whatever scraps they could find. Commander Vextar stood at the observation deck of the station, his forearms crossed, as he watched the human ship dock. His reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smirk among his people. "Look at that piece of junk," he said to his companion. "I've seen asteroid miners with better ships than that." The tall Zenthran admiral beside him let out a sound that was half laugh, half hiss. "The humans are truly pathetic. They patch their ships together like children playing with broken toys. How they ever made it to space is beyond me." Other alien officers gathered around, pointing and laughing at the human vessel. Some took pictures to share with friends back home. The sight of a ramshackle human ship was always good for entertainment at parties. "I heard they use duct tape to fix hull breaches," said a young Korthani lieutenant, causing another round of laughter. "At least they're consistent," added Vextar. "Consistently terrible at everything. Down in the station's security. Center." The duty officer barely glanced at his screens as the silent storm requested docking clearance. The automated scanners did their job, sending back readings that confirmed what everyone already knew. This was just another barely functional human ship with basic weapons, minimal shields, and life support systems that probably broke down. "Every other week, Dock 7 is open," the security officer said into his comm, already turning his attention to more important matters. Why waste time on a ship that couldn't threaten a cargo hauler? But while the aliens laughed and pointed, something much more serious was happening across the galaxy. Emergency broadcasts were flooding every communication channel with the same terrifying news. The Hegemony Armada was on the move. The Hegemony wasn't just another alien empire. They were the nightmare that kept other species awake at night. Their fleet consisted of 200 of the most advanced warships ever built, each one capable of destroying entire planets. They had perfected the art of war over thousands of years, and their arrival in any system meant only one thing: total destruction. Just 3 weeks ago, they had appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. The defense fleet stationed there was impressive by most standards: 50 well-armed ships with experienced crews and the latest military technology. The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it was over, nothing remained but floating debris and radio silence. The news kept getting worse. Intelligence reports showed the Hegemony moving steadily toward human space, destroying everything in their path. They weren't interested in conquest or negotiation. They simply erased entire civilizations from existence, then moved on to the next target. Inside the silent storm, Captain Lee Hana sat in her command chair, listening to the emergency broadcasts with the same calm expression she always wore. Her dark eyes showed no fear, no panic, just the steady focus of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire career. Lieutenant Park Jun looked up from his communications station. "Captain, we're getting priority messages from Earth. Command, they want all available ships to fall back to the inner defense perimeter." "Understood," Hana replied quietly. "What's our current status?" Engineer Kim Su's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "All systems are running." "Perfectly, Captain. We're ready for whatever comes next." The captain allowed herself a small smile. Her crew had trained for years for this moment, though none of the aliens laughing outside had any idea what they were really looking at. The silent storm might look like a collection of spare parts held together with hope and determination, but appearances could be very deceiving indeed. "Set course for the Kepler Junction," Hana ordered. "Best speed." "Captain," Park Jun said carefully, That's directly in the path of the hegemony fleet. Intelligence says they'll be there within hours. I know exactly where they'll be, Lieutenant, as the Silent Storm. Undocked from Nexus Station, the alien observers were still pointing and laughing. Some made jokes about humans being too stupid to run away from danger. Others wondered if the ship would even make it out of the system before breaking down. None of them realized they were watching the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy prepare for battle. The hegemony had spent centuries perfecting their art of destruction, but they had never faced an enemy who had perfected the art of deception. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that looks like prey. The Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Within 3 hours of the emergency alert, representatives from 47 different species had gathered in the massive circular chamber that floated in the neutral zone between star systems. The dome overhead showed the star field around them, but today nobody was looking at the peaceful view of space. Panic filled the air like smoke. The Altarian delegation, known for their careful planning and measured responses, were frantically typing on their data tablets as they calculated evacuation routes for human colonies. Their pale blue skin had turned almost white with stress, and their normally perfect diplomatic composure was cracking under pressure. "We need to face facts," announced Delegate Cathara, her crystalline voice cutting through the noise. "The hegemony Armada has never been defeated, not once in 3,000 years of recorded history. Every species that has tried to fight them has been completely wiped out." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The representatives had all heard the stories. The hegemony didn't just win battles, they erased entire civilizations from existence. Planets left as lifeless rocks, space stations reduced to floating debris, and any ship foolish enough to engage them turned into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Admiral Zethka of the Concordance Fleet stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across several nearby delegates. The old warrior's scarred face told the story of 100 battles, but even he looked shaken. "I've studied their tactics for decades," he growled in his deep voice. 3 star systems fell in the last month alone. The Zerian Empire had 200 ships and the most advanced defensive networks in the galaxy. The hegemony went through them like they were made of paper. The chamber fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. The Zerian Empire had been one of the major military powers, with weapons technology that most species could only dream of. If they couldn't even slow down the hegemony, what hope did anyone else have? "And now they're heading straight for human space," continued the Admiral. "Humanity's defenses are scattered across dozens of systems. A few patrol ships here, an orbital defense platform there. They don't stand a chance." From the upper gallery, someone called out, "How many ships do the humans even have? 20? 30? 12 combat-ready vessels," replied the Vorthak intelligence officer, reading from his datapad. "Plus 1 orbital weapons platform around Earth and a handful of mining ships that might have some basic weapons. It's not even worth calling a fleet." The laughter that followed was bitter rather than cruel. These weren't enemies mocking human weakness. These were allies who had already written humanity's obituary. Several species had already begun preparing refugee camps for any human survivors, though privately, many doubted there would be any. Ambassador Cho Minho had been sitting quietly at the human delegations section throughout this discussion. Unlike the panicked aliens around him, the middle-aged diplomat appeared completely calm. His hands were folded neatly on the table in front of him, and his expression was as peaceful as someone enjoying a morning cup of coffee. Finally, he stood up and walked to the central speaking platform. The chamber gradually fell quiet as delegates noticed his unusual composure. Here was a man whose entire species was about to be wiped out, yet he looked like he didn't have a care in the world. "Honored delegates," Cho Minho began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "I want to thank the Council for your concern about humanity's situation. Your offers of refugee assistance and evacuation support are deeply appreciated." The Altarian delegate leaned forward eagerly. "We can have transport ships in human space within 48 hours. Our evacuation protocols can save millions of civilian lives." Cho Minho smiled politely. "That won't be necessary. Earth fleet has the situation under control. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds before the chamber erupted in shocked laughter. Delegates turned to each other with expressions of disbelief. Even the normally diplomatic Altarians couldn't hide their amazement at what seemed like complete human delusion. The Vorthak military advisor was laughing so hard that tears were streaming from his compound eyes. "Under control," he gasped between chuckles. "With what exactly? Are you planning to throw rocks at them?" "Your entire fleet couldn't stop a pirate raid, let alone the hegemony Armada," added a Zenthran commander. "This isn't the time for human pride. This is the time to run." But Cho Minho's expression never changed. He waited patiently for the laughter to die down before continuing. "Captain Lee Hana of the Earth vessel, Silent Storm, will intercept the hegemony Armada at Kepler Junction in approximately 6 hours. The laughter that followed was even louder than before. Several delegates actually fell out of their chairs. The idea was so absurd that even the translators seemed to have trouble processing it correctly. "One ship," shouted someone from the back of the chamber. "One single human ship against 200 hegemony dreadnoughts? I've seen that ship," called out Commander Vexitar from the station observer's gallery. "It's a rust bucket held together with spare parts. I wouldn't trust it to deliver mail, let alone fight a war." Personal communication devices began lighting up all over the chamber as delegates started placing bets on how quickly the human ship would be destroyed. The odds were heavily in favor of complete annihilation within 30 seconds of the first shot being fired. The Altarian ambassador shook his head sadly. "Ambassador Cho, I understand that humans value courage above common sense, but this isn't bravery. This is suicide. One frigate cannot possibly—" His words were cut off as Captain Hana's voice suddenly filled the chamber through the communication system. The sound was crystal clear, as if she were standing right there among them. "Galactic Council, this is Captain Lee Hana of the Earth vessel, Silent Storm. We are currently en route to Kepler Junction and will be in position within 6 hours. The hegemony threat will be handled." The calm confidence in her voice was almost as shocking as Ambassador Cho's earlier statement. Here was someone who was about to face certain death, yet she sounded like she was discussing the weather. "Captain," the Altarian ambassador called, "out, please reconsider. There is no shame in retreat when facing impossible odds." "Thank you for your concern," came Hana's reply, "but Earth doesn't abandon its responsibilities. The Silent Storm will handle this situation." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Slowly, the betting pools began updating their odds. The longest estimate for human survival was now 45 seconds, but even that seemed optimistic to most observers. What none of them realized was that they were about to witness the most one-sided battle in galactic history. They just had the wrong side picked as the winner. The fabric of space itself seemed to tear apart as 200 massive warships materialized at Kepler Junction. The hegemony Armada emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metallic predators, their dark hulls blocking out the stars behind them. Each ship was a masterpiece of destruction, built over decades by the galaxy's most feared military force. Admiral Crathmore stood motionless on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. His towering frame cast a long shadow across the command deck as holographic displays showed the perfect positioning of his fleet. Every ship was exactly where it should be, arranged in battle formations that had conquered 1,000 worlds. The ET Admiral's 6 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he studied the tactical readouts. Dreadnoughts formed the center of his formation, their massive hulls bristling with enough firepower to crack planets. Cruisers and destroyers spread out in supporting positions, creating overlapping fields of fire that could vaporize entire enemy fleets in seconds. Fast attack ships patrolled the edges, ready to hunt down any vessels that tried to escape. "Fleet deployment complete, Admiral," reported his second-in-command. "All ships report ready for combat operations." Crathmore's mandibles clicked together, in what passed for a smile among his species. 3,000 years of warfare had taught the hegemony how to destroy their enemies with ruthless efficiency. "Today would be no different, sir," called out the tactical officer from his station. "We have a contact directly ahead." The Admiral turned toward the main display, expecting to see the first wave of human defenders. Perhaps a dozen ships, maybe. 20 if the humans had managed to gather their scattered forces. Instead, a single green dot appeared on the screen. "Magnify," Crathmore ordered. The image that appeared on the main viewer drew confused murmurs from the bridge crew. Floating, alone in the vast emptiness of space, was what could only be described as a flying scrapyard. The ship's hull was a patchwork of different metals, some sections clearly newer than others, giving it the appearance of something that had been repaired too many times to count. "What is that thing?" asked the weapons officer. "Run a full sensor." "Sweep," the admiral commanded. The readings that came back were almost insulting. The vessel registered as a small frigate, barely 200 meters long. Its weapons were basic plasma cannons that wouldn't scratch the paint on a hegemony destroyer. The shields were so weak they might as well not exist, and the hull showed. "Stress fractures in at least a dozen places." "It's a human ship, sir," reported the sensor operator. "Designation appears to be Silent Storm." Laughter rippled across the bridge. Even by human standards, this was pathetic. The hegemony had faced desperate last stands before, but usually the enemy at least brought ships that could fight back. "They sent one ship?" chuckled the communications officer. "One broken-down freighter against our entire armada?" Admiral Crathmore studied the display with growing amusement. He had expected the humans to run, perhaps scatter their population to distant colonies, where it might take years to hunt them all down. Instead, they had sent what appeared to be a garbage hauler to face the most powerful military force in the EU galaxy. "Sir, the human vessel is broadcasting on all frequencies," announced the communications officer. "Put it through," Crathmore ordered. "This should be entertaining." Captain Hannah's voice filled the bridge, clear and professional despite the impossible odds she faced. "Hegemony vessels, this is Captain Lee Hannah of the Terran vessel Silent Storm. You are ordered to surrender immediately and withdraw from this system." The bridge erupted in laughter so loud that several officers had to hold on to their stations to keep from falling over. Even the normally disciplined bridge crew couldn't maintain their composure in the face of such absurdity. "Did she just order us to surrender?" gasped the tactical officer between fits of laughter. Admiral Crathmore's own laughter was a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the entire bridge. "Humans," he said, wiping tears from his eyes, "their stupidity never ceases to amaze me." From his position at the communications station, Commander Yang Seok watched the display with a mixture of shame and sadness. The human defector had joined the hegemony 15 years ago after his home colony was destroyed, but moments like this reminded him why he had tried so hard to forget his origins. "Yang Seok," the admiral called out, still chuckling. "Your former species wants to talk. Why don't you explain the situation to them?" The human commander reluctantly activated his communication panel. His voice carried across space to the lone ship waiting in their path. "Unknown human vessel, you are facing the full might of the hegemony Armada. 200 warships with enough firepower to glass entire planets. Surrender now, and you will be granted a quick death." But Captain Hannah's response came back without hesitation, her voice as calm as if she were ordering coffee. "We gave you your chance, Commander Yang. You chose to stand with those who destroy worlds instead of protecting them." Yang Seok flinched. Somehow this unknown captain had identified him, had seen through years of trying to bury his human identity. "Lieutenant Park," Hannah continued over the open channel, "begin recording all sensor data and communications. The galaxy should see what happens to those who threaten Earth." Admiral Crathmore had heard enough. The human captain's ridiculous bravado was beginning to annoy him, and he had a schedule to keep. 3 more star systems were marked for destruction after this one. "Void render," he commanded, addressing the destroyer at the front of his formation. "Remove that obstacle. Minimum power. We don't want to waste energy on such a pathetic target." The sleek destroyer moved forward like a predator approaching wounded prey. Its weapon systems came online with a high-pitched whine that could be heard even through the vacuum of space. Plasma cannons that could punch through battle station armor locked onto the helpless human ship. "Firing solutions locked," reported the Void Render's weapons officer. Yang Seok made one last attempt to end this without bloodshed. "Human vessel, this is your final warning. Surrender or be destroyed." The response that came back would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Captain, Hana's voice was steady, almost gentle, like a teacher patiently explaining something to a slow student. "Thank you for the warning, Commander, but you should know something about humans. We don't surrender. We don't run. And we definitely don't let bullies destroy innocent people without a fight." She paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, there was something different in her tone, something that made even Admiral Crathmore stop laughing. "Fire when ready. Void render. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate Earth." The hegemony destroyer unleashed enough plasma, energy to vaporize a small moon. The brilliant beams of superheated matter streaked across space toward their target, and every sensor in the hegemony fleet locked on to record the destruction of the last human ship. But what happened next would change the course of galactic history forever. The brilliant plasma beams from the void render streaked across space like fingers of liquid fire. Each beam carried enough destructive energy to melt through the hull of a battleship or reduce an entire space station to glowing vapor. The hegemony crew watched their displays with bored satisfaction, waiting for the familiar flash of light. That would mark another enemy's destruction, but the light never came. Instead, something impossible happened. The plasma beams struck the silent storm directly in the center of her hull and simply disappeared. Not deflected by shields, not absorbed by armor plating, they vanished completely, as if they had never existed at all. The bridge of the eternal dominance fell completely silent. Admiral Crathmore's 6 eyes widened as he stared at the tactical display, trying to process what he had just witnessed. His mind, trained by centuries of warfare, refused to accept what his sensors were telling him. "Run diagnostics on all sensor arrays," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "There must be some malfunction." "Sir," the sensor operator called out, his voice shaking, "all systems are functioning normally. The energy readings are... they're gone, completely absorbed." Before anyone could respond, Captain Hana's voice filled the hegemony bridge once again. But this time something had changed. Gone was the polite tone of someone making a request. Now she spoke with the absolute authority of someone who held all the cards. "Hull-integrated quantum absorption matrix active," she announced calmly. "Thank you for powering our weapon systems. Your attack has been most helpful." Admiral Crathmore felt something he hadn't experienced in over 200 years of combat. Fear. Pure, cold terror that started in his stomach and spread through his entire body like ice water. "What did she just say?" whispered the tactical officer. The answer came not in words, but in what they saw next. The silent storm began to shimmer and blur like a mirage in the desert. The patched hull plating that had made her look like a flying junkyard started to flicker and fade, revealing something underneath that made every hegemony officer's blood run cold. "Holographic camouflage," breathed Commander Yang Seok, his human heritage allowing him to understand what the others could not. "They've been hiding their true appearance." The disguise fell away like a shed skin, and what emerged was nothing, like the broken-down freighter they had been laughing at moments before. The silent storm's real hull was sleek and black, with smooth curves that seemed to bend light around them. She was massive, easily 3 times larger than she had appeared, with weapon ports that now opened like hungry mouths along her sides. "Impossible," Admiral Crathmore stammered. "Ships can't just change size. Physics doesn't work that way." But the evidence was right there on every sensor screen in his fleet. The mass readings were climbing steadily as the human ship revealed her true dimensions. What had registered as a small frigate now showed up as something larger than their biggest dreadnought. Engineer Kim Su's voice crackled across the communication channels from somewhere deep inside the human vessel. "Captain, we're at full charge. All primary systems show green across the board. Quantum disruptors are online and ready." Captain Hana's response was broadcast on every frequency the hegemony used, ensuring that every ship in their fleet could hear her words clearly. "Thank you, Kim. What you see before you, Admiral Crathmore, is the HSV Silent Storm, humanity's first quantum warfare vessel." The Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously as he tried to process this information. Quantum warfare was theoretical technology, something that existed only in the wildest dreams of their best scientists. Yet here was a human ship that seemed to be using it as easily as breathing. "You see," Captain Hana continued, her voice carrying a hint of amusement, We humans learned something very important during our early encounters with other species. Being underestimated is the greatest tactical advantage in the universe. While you were all laughing at our primitive technology, we were developing weapons systems that your science can barely understand. The weapons that had appeared to be simple plasma cannons began to unfold and reconfigure themselves. What emerged looked like nothing anyone in the hegemony fleet had ever seen before. Sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to bend space around them, creating visual distortions that hurt to look at directly. Lieutenant Park Jun's voice joined the conversation from the human ship's tactical station. "Captain, I have target. Locks on all 200 enemy vessels. Gravitational pulse generators are charged and ready. Quantum disruptors show full power. Kinetic harpoon systems are armed and standing by." The words hit the hegemony bridge crew like physical blows. Gravitational pulse generators were weapons that could crush ships by manipulating space-time itself. Quantum disruptors could phase matter out of existence, and kinetic harpoons could drag vessels across impossible distances in seconds. "This is impossible," Admiral Crathmore said again, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was right there in front of him, displayed on every screen and confirmed by every sensor his fleet possessed. Commander Yang Seok stared at the transformed human ship with a mixture of awe and regret. "They've been planning this for years," he said quietly. "Maybe decades. Every time we called them primitive, every time we laughed at their technology, they were learning, watching, preparing." The communication channels filled with panicked voices from other hegemony ships as their sensors began picking up the same impossible readings. The small human freighter they had been preparing to swat like an annoying insect had revealed itself to be the most advanced warship any of them had ever encountered. "Admiral," called out the fleet communications officer, "we're receiving emergency broadcasts from the outer picket ships. They're requesting immediate tactical assessment of the human vessel." But Admiral Crathmore was no longer listening to his subordinates. All of his attention was focused on the tactical display, showing the Silent Storm's true capabilities. The numbers didn't make sense. No single ship should be able to generate that much power, carry that many different weapon systems, or manipulate space-time the way their sensors suggested this one could. "Sir," the tactical officer said urgently, "the human ship is rotating to bring her main weapons to bear. Whatever she's planning to do, we need to act now." Admiral Crathmore's training finally kicked in, overriding his shock and fear. He had faced impossible odds before and survived through decisive action. "All ships, evasive maneuvers, spread formation, and prepare for full assault. Concentrate all fire on that vessel." His orders went out across the fleet's communication network, reaching 200 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Engines roared to life as massive vessels began changing course, bringing countless weapons to bear on the lone human ship. But even as his fleet responded to his commands, Admiral Crathmore couldn't shake the feeling that he was already too late. The humans had spent years, perhaps decades, preparing for this moment. They had allowed themselves to be underestimated, laughed at, dismissed as primitive and weak, and now the galaxy was about to learn the price of that arrogance. The battle that would reshape galactic history began at exactly 14:27 Standard Time and ended at 14:34:34. 7 minutes and 34 seconds. That's all it took for humanity to announce its arrival as the galaxy's newest superpower. The Silent Storm moved first, her weapon systems coming online with a sound that seemed to make space itself hum with contained energy. Captain Hannah stood calmly on her bridge, watching as 200 of the galaxy's most feared warships spread out in attack formation around her single vessel. "Beginning engagement sequence," Lieutenant Park Jun announced from his tactical station. "All weapon systems are responding perfectly." What happened next defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. The Silent Storm's first weapons weren't cannons or missiles. They were gravitational shears that reached out like invisible hands and began folding space itself around entire squadrons of hegemony ships. Admiral Crathmore watched in horror as 12 of his destroyers simply vanished from existence, crushed into points of infinite density that lasted for barely a second before disappearing completely. The space where they had been now showed nothing but empty starfield, as if the Ships had never existed at all. What kind of weapon can do that? Screamed his tactical officer. Before anyone could answer, the human ship fired again. This time, quantum disruptors lanced out across space, striking a formation of heavy cruisers. The beams didn't explode on impact or burn through armor. They simply caused the targeted ships to phase out of reality. One moment they were there, massive vessels bristling with weapons, and the next moment there was nothing but empty void. "Sir, we've lost 37 ships in the first minute," reported the fleet communications officer, his voice cracking with panic. "The outer squadrons are requesting immediate support." But Admiral Crathmore couldn't provide support because he was fighting for his own survival. The silent storm had turned her attention to the center of his formation, where his flagship and its escort vessels maintained their position. "Target the flagship." Captain Hanna's voice came clearly through the chaos, as calm as if she were ordering dinner. Lieutenant Park Jun's fingers danced across his control panels. "Kinetic harpoon systems locked onto the Eternal Dominance. Ready to fire on your command, Captain." Fire. The weapons that launched from the silent storm weren't energy beams or explosive missiles. They were solid projectiles that moved faster than anything the hegemony had ever encountered, traveling at a significant percentage of light speed. But speed wasn't their only terrifying feature. They were also equipped with gravitational manipulation technology that allowed them to drag their targets wherever the human ship wanted them to go. The kinetic harpoons struck Admiral Crathmore's flagship and immediately began pulling the massive dreadnought toward a cluster of its own escort ships. The Admiral felt his ship shudder and groan as forces beyond his understanding dragged it across space like a toy, being pulled by an invisible string. "Emergency thrust. All engines full reverse," he screamed, but it was useless. The Eternal Dominance slammed into 3 of its escort cruisers with such force that the collision created an expanding fireball visible from light years away. 20 ships died in that single impact as the explosion spread outward, consuming everything in its path. Commander Yang Seok, somehow still alive in a secondary command center, managed to activate the fleet's emergency communication system. His voice, filled with desperation and terror, cut through the chaos. "All ships retreat, full withdrawal. This is not a battle we can win." But Captain Hanna's response came back immediately, her voice still unnaturally calm. "Negative, Commander. Yang, you had your chance to surrender when this began. That opportunity has passed." The silent storm began rotating slowly, bringing different weapon systems to bear on the fleeing hegemony vessels. What the aliens didn't realize was that their tight military formations, perfected over thousands of years of conquest, had become a liability. The human ship's area effect weapons were designed specifically to turn enemy numbers against them. Gravitational pulse waves rippled outward from the silent storm, causing space itself to buckle and twist. Ships that had been trying to escape found themselves pulled into collision courses with their neighbors. Vessels that had taken decades to build and cost the resources of entire planets were reduced to expanding clouds of glowing debris in seconds. The quantum disruptors fired in sequence, each beam causing another section of the hegemony fleet to simply cease existing. Dreadnoughts that had conquered star systems vanished from reality as if they had never been built. Carriers that housed thousands of crew members phased out of existence, leaving not even wreckage behind. Engineer Kim Su's voice echoed from the silent storm's engine room, professional and matter-of-fact despite the destruction happening around them. "Captain, all systems are performing within normal parameters. Power levels holding steady at optimal efficiency." "Acknowledged, Kim. Continue monitoring all systems." By the 4th minute of the battle, half the hegemony fleet had been destroyed. By the 6th minute, only scattered survivors remained there. Formation completely shattered, and their will to fight broken. The survivors weren't retreating in any organized fashion. They were running in pure panic, abandoning their positions and fleeing in random directions. As the 7th minute ended, the space around Kepler Junction looked like a graveyard. Twisted metal debris floated where mighty warships had been moments before. Emergency beacons from escape pods and life rafts were the only signs that the great hegemony Armada had ever existed. Captain Hanna surveyed the battlefield with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the engagement. Ceasefire, begin scanning for survivors. Lieutenant Park Jun's sensors swept the debris field. Captain, I'm reading approximately 3,000 life signs in various escape pods and emergency shelters. No operational warships remain. Very good. Open a channel to Nexus Station and the Galactic Council. Her transmission reached both locations simultaneously, where thousands of alien observers had been watching the battle through long-range sensors. The viewing deck at Nexus Station, where officers had been laughing at the primitive human ship just hours before, now stood in complete silence. This is Captain Lee Hana of the Earth vessel Silent Storm. The hegemony threat has been neutralized. Rescue ships may approach to collect survivors. We will remain on station to provide assistance as needed. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Cho Minho received the news with the same serene expression he had worn during the emergency session. Around him, alien delegates sat in shocked silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The betting pools that had been so active just hours before had fallen completely quiet. Nobody was laughing now. Engineer Kim Su's voice came over the ship's communication system. Captain, stealth systems are back online. All holographic camouflage systems are ready for reactivation. Shall we resume our previous configuration? Affirmative, Kim. Set course for Earth. Standard cruising speed. The Silent Storm began to change once again. Her sleek, menacing hull shimmered and blurred as the holographic disguise reactivated. Within minutes, she looked exactly like she had when she first arrived, a battered, patched-together frigate that appeared to be held together with spare parts and determination. As the ship prepared to enter hyperspace, Captain Hana opened one final communication channel that reached every major intelligence headquarters in the galaxy. This is Captain Lee Hana of Earthfleet. Today you learned that humanity is not the primitive species you believed us to be. We allowed you to underestimate us because it served our purposes. Remember this lesson well. Humanity doesn't build warships for show or intimidation. We build them to end wars quickly and decisively. We prefer peace, but we are prepared for war. Choose wisely how you interact with us in the future. The transmission ended, and the Silent Storm vanished into hyperspace, looking for all the world like just another unremarkable human vessel limping home from a routine patrol. Within an hour, emergency meetings were being called at every major government center in the galaxy. Military assessments of human capabilities were being completely rewritten. Several species that had been planning aggressive expansion into human space quietly cancelled those plans and began drafting non-aggression treaties instead. The age of underestimating humanity was over.